You do. You look great.
Hey, here we go. We are live.
Yay,
And
we're live.
yeah, so we are hoping to rocket to 2 viewers today. And we've
And
already met our goal.
that's not counting you and I, right?
No, I was counting us. Okay.
Oh, we are the ones you're counting, so we might be the
Yes.
only ones,
You know what? It's our first try, and we just learned how to use this thing yesterday.
right?
So I think it is what it is. Do you think I should go over to YouTube to see if it is working, or should we just
No, I think it's working.
we trust in the technology?
Yes. Otherwise, you're going to have an echo, and we're live. We don't want an echo.
That's
Uh, See if the comment sections are working. I just said hi, all.
Yes, if at any time somebody gets on here, of course, this is our first effort. I don't expect anybody, but it would be cool.
No, the only ones that, if they do show up, are truly, loyal people, people in the coalition that are trying to be supportive, but probably are just really secretly, they have their laptop open, but they're scrolling social media and doing things otherwise because they're trying to look like they're supporting us. But in the reality is, they could care less or couldn't care less.
Those aren't nice things to say about our mothers. So, okay,
Sorry, Mom.
it is. It's like mom's going, yeah, forget it. There's murder she wrote on or something. Um,
Exactly.
anyway, okay, well, it's 6 o'clock, and
It's 6 o'clock. We might as well get started.
let's get started. So, Um, for posterity, anyway, I'm Kara Porter. I am one of the co-founders of the Cold Case Coalition, formerly known as the Utah Cold Case Coalition.
I am private investigator Jason Jensen. I'm also a co-founder. Uh, just a brief history: the coalition was formed under the Utah Cold Case Coalition 5 years ago, and this is our fifth anniversary of Cold Case Month. So we make it a point of bringing awareness to cold cases in every creative fashion that we can, including this year we've expanded nationally, but today we're experimenting with doing some kind of live nonsense that some wise guy thought they were going to try and stump me.
And I thought if I have to put up with this on a regular basis, I think misery loves company. I want other people to witness it. By the way, Cold Case Month actually is something that we came up with ourselves back in 2018. Basically, anyway, it was important. We wanted a long period of time so that we could do a range of things. Today, okay, on the Stump Jason. First of all, people need to know that Jason and I are good friends, and we will still be good friends at the end of the discussion. We have different approaches. I am a very risk-averse lawyer, I guess you'd say, where because I am used to a situation where everything I file with the court, every single sentence has to have an attachment, an exhibit, a source. And so I tend to be, kind of conservative about, ooh. Jason has actually helped me kind of come out of that shell a little bit because he's more, what would you call yourself? Aggressive,
Um,
confident?
Less safe. I always look at it as I take a little bit more risk because without risk, there's no gain. So we joke around, and last night we even joked that I just contrive a theory and run with it. Well, the reality is, oftentimes what I do is I do either crime scene analysis or an offender profile, and I build my theory from there. So it's not so loosey goosey as I was suggesting last night, but it's a different approach than what Kara's used to. She likes to see all the physical evidence, and like she explained last night, she'll have 6 pieces of evidence just to form a colon, a semicolon.
But I do want to give an example of something that I personally witnessed that validates Jason's instincts. we were on a phone call, and Jason, you'll probably remember this. This is before there was something announced on the Angie Dodge case. And we were on the phone with Angie. She was from up in Idaho. And we were on the phone with Carol Dodge, who every person should know who that is. Google her after this. Anyway, she described what had happened, et cetera. And I don't know, probably 20 minutes into it, I can't remember if we were off the phone or whatever, Jason said, well, it's somebody either across the street or 2 doors down either direction. And it was. And so he's got good instincts. And keep in mind also that as a lawyer, the questions I ask and the things I say are sometimes for the purpose of dialogue. And so it doesn't necessarily reflect my own personal views, because as a lawyer, I just say what I am being paid to say. Oh, I'm not being paid here. I'm a volunteer. But so Jason, do you mind if we just let me start stumping you with a question that I've got. And I want to say hello. I don't know if I'm allowed to say hi to the person that just said hi to us. Hey, if you're there, say if we can say your name. Well, I don't want somebody
too much of a lawyer. It's okay. The whole world sees it. Hi, Avery. How are you?
Do?
I hope we don't bore you to death.
Okay, too late. We've lost Avery. No, just kidding. Let me start. I'm going to start stumping you a little bit with questions that I personally was asked when we first founded this organization. But okay, with the cold case, especially the way we define it, which is more than 3 years ago, you pretty much know you're not going to be interfering with an ongoing investigation, right? You're not going to cause problems, maybe not so much with the warm cases or the hot cases. So let me just come right out and ask, working on the hot cases, shouldn't that be left to law enforcement, at least give them a chance rather than step in and start doing social media an hour after the person has gone missing, or et cetera?
But that's an interesting question. Obviously there's a different point of view there. With law enforcement working on a fresh case, okay, so something that just happened yesterday or whatever, you got to be careful not to step on law enforcement toes, because you don't want to be obstructing with their process. You don't want to go, let's say, make it a sprint to see who can get to a witness first and things like that, because if there's only one chance to get that evidence or one chance to get an interview and you blow it for law enforcement, you're probably going to upset somebody. They're probably going to come down on you hard and make you stop or even charge you. So when it comes to these hot cases, you really just want to open yourself up to the public so that they have an alternate source to convey information if they have a reluctance or an aversion to speak to law enforcement, because sometimes somebody has some information, but they're not going to call the police. But aside from that, it's really the knowledge of the private investigator or even web sleuthers to know their lane and stay in there, not get in the way of the investigation. That's largely why law enforcement doesn't share their intimate details with the public, for fear that somebody is going to contaminate their investigation.
And let me follow up on that. A lot of people go, well, you're a regular on Court TV and also News Nation. And then there was that cool show that you filmed recently for the Weather Channel, or anyway. So you do a lot, and a lot of times, granted, especially with Court TV, they do cover cold cases, and they have pretty good diversity. But a lot of times it's just brand new, something that just happened. Is all of the punditry when the police can't even respond, right? They can't say anything in their defense. You could be completely barking up the wrong tree. Does that complicate the police's job because now they're being criticized and they can't respond?
No, that's actually the beauty. Sometimes they would like to get a piece of information out, but they don't dare, because the difference between, let's say, me making an opinion and sharing it with the public is I could be wrong. It doesn't compromise the integrity of the case. It doesn't cause a chink in the armor for the prosecutor when they're trying to convince a jury that there's proof beyond reasonable doubt. So if they come out and they say, for instance, we're looking for a red sedan, and then ultimately they end up arresting a guy with a black Chevy, Tahoe, then there's already an issue that a defense attorney may seize upon to say, you're looking after the wrong guy. 6 weeks ago, you described a completely, entirely different car. So the less information law enforcement lets out, the less they have to defend down the road.
Well, I definitely understand why law enforcement, at least at first, cannot release information. As you know, we've got some problems with law enforcement not releasing information 51 years later. So I get that. Well,
that's a long time.
It's a long time, but as we both know, there is a case right now where that's happening. Anyway, so, okay, what about situations where members of the public are trying to put together cases against people? They don't have the reports, et cetera. And I'm thinking of a specific situation in a case that you were officially on, which is the recent last year's double murder in Moab. And I can think of at least one podcaster who was just adamant that a member of the family was involved. You know what I'm talking about
right.
There? How does that help?
Well, gosh, it really muddles things up. I mean, for instance, to accuse a family member of being personally responsible for a murder, let alone a double murder, in this scenario, that's defamation. It's defamation per se. You as a trial lawyer, you know what that means. Defamation per se means they don't have to prove damages to successfully sue you. So if you call someone a criminal, a racist, a murderer, you better have your facts, or you could literally see, litigation and have to pay out for ruining someone's reputation in the public that way.
Now, before we scare any of the podcasters out there, it's defamation unless you state the reasons.
Right. You got to have facts to support it.
You need to state the facts, and they can be BS facts. They can be, I'm pretty sure that it's a family member because, I saw a quarter on the sidewalk and that told me it was a family member. As long as you state what your reasons are for having your opinion, then you're free to do it. But I'm just wondering, one of these days, Jason, okay, you go out there on your page and you'll say, by golly, here's who killed these people. And you do that like every few minutes. But at some point, isn't a defense attorney going to either call you to the stand or something and say, tell us all your reasons why you said it was this person and yet they arrested my client instead?
Well, whenever that happens, certainly I have the information to back it up or I wouldn't be posting it. But if a defense attorney tries to use my materials to create doubt, to get his client, the true suspect, out of trouble, they got a long ways to go, because I'll just actually take the stand and admit that I was wrong. Because one of the things is very clear, I don't have privity to all the evidence that law enforcement has. Like in the double murder of Kylan and Crystal, they had cell phone tower data. They had a bunch of interviews and things that I would never cross that line to obtain. And as far as cell phone tower data and laptops and things like that, there's certainly things from labs and stuff they have access to that no matter how good I am, I could never get access to, let alone analyze.
Okay.
So oftentimes they have more information than I have, and we're working with what maybe a tipster would provide, or maybe we deduce out of logic.
If you are called to the stand and your plan is to admit that you were wrong, please notify us so that I can have the billboard reserved. Hey, let's segue into something when we're talking, and everybody, please remember that this is called Stump Jason. So the questions are intended to be hot topics and serious topics, and doesn't necessarily mean that I think I just want to make it clear that people don't think that all I do is bag on Jason.
So,
Um,
so you're not
these
going to ask me what size pump I would wear or anything that I could not possibly answer.
No, I'm going to wait and look at the psychological profiles online that are already online about you and that issue. No, but I want to talk about something else, and you have opined on it, as has half the Western Hemisphere. And you'd be the first to say you don't have the reports, haven't, or at least haven't looked at the reports, and that's the John Benet Ramsey. Why haven't they tested DNA thing?
Right,
Um,
right,
okay, and so I will admit now. Granted, you know that I'm not a scientist. I am the CEO of a forensic DNA lab.
right. Intermountain
But
forensics, yes.
yes, and yes, which by the way was founded by the coalition. So yay us. But I
Thanks
don't.
to you, because I didn't have the abilities to do this, but you had the vision and you had the financial resources to turn to, and for that reason, it's going to be a 5-star. It's a nonprofit. It's going to really change the world, in my opinion. So
Oh,
great, great work.
no, I'm pretty excited about it. But so here I am, a CEO. I've been involved in this lab since literally we were tearing down the old insurance office that used to be there. I don't consider myself qualified to opine on what DNA should be available or what people should do with it. I mean, for example, I do know enough, for example, that when everybody says on the Ramsey case, well, they can just do what they did with the Golden State Killer, that assumes that there is no mixture. And you're going to have a mixture in most cases involving touch DNA. I mean, if you've got semen or you've got blood or something where you're only going to have one source, sure. But right now, you cannot separate mixtures in these genetic genealogy profiles. Now,
That
having said
makes sense. Yeah, it sounds like you're lecturing, not asking a stumping question. So
look, I get to at least say some things. No, there's a reason why
I sense a buildup. So are you
there
going to
is.
hit me with a
Well,
1-2?
well, I am, because this one, there's an awful lot of people out there who are saying things. And by the way, I haven't studied it enough to know what the police are or aren't doing. But should people be just jumping on it and saying, I can't believe the police, what are they doing with, when they don't know what's going on behind the scenes because the police can't comment?
Well, they are, right, including myself. I've come out and said that the Boulder police should relinquish the case to a different agency as requested by the Ramseys, or reassign it to a different investigator. Is that wrong of me? No, I'll give you my answer. My answer is because they have lost trust of the family, and I think that's paramount in any investigation, that the victim's family have faith in the process, faith in the investigator working on the case, that they're going to be dealt a fair hand, and that justice is being sought. Bear in mind that for 15 or more years, these investigators were accusing the family, the Ramseys themselves, of being responsible for John Benet's death. DNA cleared that, according to the DA's office, in 2008.
Okay. I'll let that go.
Right. But I'm just reciting what's been publicly shared. So,
Well, on some sites, but that's okay. Okay. No, I get it. That is one area where we just see it differently, which is
well. Now that we're just on John Benet, let me just digress for just a moment. Your approach to this case would have been to request all the records and go through every police report, every statement ever obtained, because that's your style. My style is I don't even request the records, because that was all a dead end investigation. And why prejudice my viewpoint? I'd rather, as an investigator myself, investigate it with a fresh start, fresh look, fresh witness interviews, and develop my own theories and go down that route.
and my response to that is Phyllis O'Brien. Okay. Is it Carson? Phyllis Carson?
Yeah,
I get
Phyllis
that.
O'Brien Carson, correct.
Yes. Okay. That case. First of all, you have a number of people who have moved or perhaps died or whatever, and sometimes you need the inconsistencies. But what happened? Phyllis, okay, her case, which we profiled it. We have a podcast that we do periodically called Cold Case Talk. And one of the episodes we did was, we called it A Tale of Two Cold Cases. and they were mothers who had been murdered around the same time, and we profiled how one of them got solved, and at that time the other one hadn't.
Right.
Now, and ultimately solved Phyllis's case? The
But
police
solved
file.
Phyllis's case, and I'm glad you're segueing into this because it really addresses the legitimacy of the request to move the case out of Boulder PD. And that is where in Phyllis's case, the law enforcement assigned to the case, San Joaquin County, was not cooperative with the family, did not include the updates or anything like that, so the family could review the evidence and pinpoint any flaws or identify any suspects or show familiarity with any particular individuals that they were looking at. On the other hand, in Loretta Jones's case, law enforcement solved that case by sharing the files, cooperating with the family members, and ultimately led into like a setup where the suspect that they had identified for all these decades saw all the news coverage about it and then went to the neighbor and asked, what's DNA and how long does it last? And so that information got its way back to law enforcement. So they knew they had him. They brought him in and he for interrogation, and he confessed. So when you work with the family, cases get solved. It seems a lot easier than if you keep everything a secret from the family and you treat them as outsiders.
I do agree with that, but the information needed to solve Phyllis's case was in the reports. Most of the Ramsey reports are all publicly available. But again, lawyer perspective, I would never file anything in court or whatever without having read every single shred of paper.
Twice.
Approaches twice and citing to it and summarizing it, indexing it. That's actually why we are a good team, especially with Tom, our third co-founder. He's a journalist, and he kind of has to be somewhere in between the two of us. He can't wait 6 months to write his story, right? He can't do me like I am, but he also can't just say, here's a case, here's my theory. I mean, I'm exaggerating, I'm making fun.
No, you're right. That's a good
Tom is like kind of the combination of us, where he's can't wait as long as I would, but he probably would, wait a little longer than you would. But we do have a question, and which
oh no, someone's trying to stump me from the audience.
Well, this one shouldn't stump you because it's about Rosie Tapia.
I'm very well acquainted.
Yes, the entire reason that we exist. Anyway, and so the question is, okay, well, first of all, when did Rosie disappear? How old was she? And for anyone who's not familiar with us, this is extremely important because this is the reason we exist. And then can you talk about some of the evidence in the case?
Sure. Rosie Tapia was a sweet little 6-year-old that was abducted from her bedroom from an apartment complex, the Heartland Apartments here in Salt Lake City in August 13th of 1995. That is why Cold Case Month is in August. And the whole reason why the coalition was formed was because I was hired first on the case, then they turned to Kara, and then Kara developed an idea, let's form a coalition, and brought in a bunch of other think tankers, including Tom Harvey, and then eventually it just ended up being us three to form an official coalition. And with the blessings of the Tapia family, we dedicated our time to look at all of the unsolved cases in Utah, not just hers. But what happened was on August 13th, 1995, about 3 a.m., between 3 and 5, she was removed from her bedroom while she was asleep. And about 8 a.m. the next morning, they found her floating in the service canal right next to that runs along the side of the Heartland Apartments. And they removed her. They originally, when I say they, law enforcement originally thought, well, maybe she let herself out the bedroom because people would climb in and out of that particular bedroom window because it was ground level. So they assumed maybe she let herself out. Then when they found her remains in the canal, they figured, well, maybe she fell in, involuntarily. Once they did an autopsy and learned that she had been sexually assaulted, now they knew she was abducted and she was murdered. And, I don't know if there's DNA. I know that they have examined just like they would normally do. The news has covered it plenty of times that they had done DNA testing. They have her clothing. They've done the medical exam. Things like that are clearly evidence of the crime. The problem is they haven't been able to identify a suspect that's responsible for the crime. We haven't had witnesses come forward that specifically say John did it or Bill did it, but we remain hopeful that that's going to happen anytime soon.
Well, and one of the things that we've done is when we find new information about people in that case, we package it up and we send it. And we say, here's some information. You may not have known that this person wasn't on the lease, but he was living in this apartment, things like that. It is public information that the Rosie Tapia case was the first case on which MVAC was used. And people who are familiar with, with DNA and in crime fighting are aware that MVAC, we're big believers in MVAC, and we've had one the whole time that our lab's been around. And it was used in that. One problem is sometimes it's, and I believe this was I know it was publicly reported. Sometimes you just have such a high ratio, let's say, of maybe a victim's blood to what appears to be perhaps male DNA or something like that. And that it's going to be impossible to get a genetic profile. It's going, a genetic genealogy profile. It's going to be almost impossible even to get just a traditional STR type of thing. But we keep working on it. This is our case. This is our reason for existence, and now it has expanded.
Right, this is one of our biggest cases, one of our most important cases.
Absolutely, we are never going to give up on that case. Let me kind of switch gears a little bit here. One of the things that we run into all the time is a case where somebody comes to us and says, will you look at this case involving my father? Or you had one, I believe, where a case had been closed as suicide. And I think it was that person's mother, I believe, who came to you. And right. People come to us and we end up getting cases reopened, actually more often than you would think. What would you say if somebody said, good grief, let sleeping dogs lie? There's already budget problems with law enforcement. Just leave those cases closed. We've got too many others to work on already.
Well, that would be that one individual's, opinion, but really, we're not really concerned about the occasional naysayer. We're more interested in helping justice for the victim, bringing voice for that person. We're here to help the victim's family because we really want to see them, just as the living are the ones that are in the greatest pain. And then there's the community. For instance, in Rosie's case, it shook the core of the entire community because, to be abducted from your own bedroom was one of the parents' worst nightmare because, you think that inside your home, you're safe. You think your children are safe inside your home. And when someone's willing or daring enough to come into your home and steal your child, that leaves you the most feeling violated as far as your sense of, as a parent, protecting your children.
And I would just add an additional purpose. They did a study about, how there are these mandatory DNA collection things. Is there any correlation between crime prevention and knowing that your DNA might end up in these databases, CODIS, et cetera? And I don't know if it's legit or not, but the result was that there was a 1%. The scholars at the university estimated a 1% reduction in certain types of crime that they attributed to people's knowledge that their DNA might get them. And I believe the same could be true if you know you're going to get got. I don't care if it's been 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. I don't care if you're dead. If you need to think about the fact that, do you want your family humiliated? Because that's what's going to happen. Because I strongly believe that we have to explore it. Hey, we have a question. How does one become a private investigator?
Well, every state's going to be different, and some states don't even have licensing requirements. Like for instance, Idaho or Colorado, you don't need to be issued a license from.
Aha! He's frozen. I can say what I want. He won't know. Clearly, there are no qualifications to be a private investigator, as evidenced by tonight's guest.
The state.
Keep
Hear
going.
me? Can you not hear me? Oh,
I
there I am.
can hear you fine. There was nothing
Oh, I
happening.
don't know what happened. But anyway, here in Utah, we have certain hours you have to meet in order to qualify for an apprentice license, more to have a registrant license. That means you're employable. And then you have an agency license, which means you can own a detective agency. So that can be obtained in various ways. You can work for somebody as an apprentice. You can have a degree in some kind of investigative field like forensics or criminal justice or digital forensics. But other than that, so education or actually be employed in the field. But you can do lateral stuff as well. Like I had 13 years paralegal experience, which.
Is anybody else? Okay. Okay. Am I the only one? I am getting a frozen Jason.
Directly. I'm back. Sorry.
Are you back? Okay.
I don't know what. Every time this guy walks by my office, it disrupts my connection.
He's magnetic, huh? Bada boom. Okay. So we have a question. It's probably not I'm going to say it's probably not a fair question on the Stump Jason thing, but because it's about a specific case that you might not ever have been asked to opine on. But it says, hey, Buster. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Hey, Mr. Jensen, what can you tell me about the 3 missing women from Springfield, Missouri? We are still sitting on pins and needles in this area and seeking answers.
Wow. 3 missing women. It makes you wonder if, there's some kind of link between them all. Do we have like a serial killer or something like that? So I would like to know more about when these disappearances occurred, how far apart they were, if they have any friends or family members in common, because that might open the door to the direction that you would investigate this, because it's tragic when one person's missing, but 3 in a small community, it really makes you scratch your head that there's something that could be there.
See, and my response would be, I would like to see those records. I'm not familiar with the case. I would like to review, etc. But again, that's actually, like I said, you, me, and Tom, we make it great because you can't be paralyzed like I am and do what we do. I should say like I used to be. Because as you know, I've been known to stalk a few people that I'm absolutely convinced murdered their family member. And I've even gone public naming some people. So,
speaking of which, I was asked today about Diana Ramirez. When are we going to name a name there?
Let's
we'll have
do
to
it.
Talk in private with that one.
But we should. But you know what? My thought is we don't do our podcasts all that often. But that case we have, let's do it right, because that case deserves, that 38 minutes or whatever the average podcast thing is. And let's do a thing, because you and I have both agreed that we feel pretty confident, and this is pretty rare, guys. We are both willing to name somebody in that case. I have another case, by the way, I want to run past you, because I told Channel 4, I said, I'll name this name, but their legal department nixed it. So, which I get, but it tells you if I'm ready to go there,
Yeah, if you're ready to go there, that means you've crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's. You're ready to march forward.
Okay, here comes a stump one. Of course, these ones about specific cases. You know anything about Kathy Harmon? I do.
Oh, I know. I was about to say, if I don't, I know you do, because that is the difference concerning our 400 cold cases here in Utah. I've done deep dives into many of them and feel like we're close to solving many of those. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, Kara's made it a point to actually dip into all 400, some more than others, but she's very thorough on having at least basic knowledge of every case, right? Is that fair to say?
It is. And that's partly, I don't want anybody to feel like their case is somehow not important. And so I like to, and so far, of course, now I'm just asking for it. This is not Stump Kara. It is Stump Jason.
Well, no, it's a fair question, and I'm stumped. I don't know anything about Kathy Harmon, but the name's there. Kara,
right.
Keep the platform for at least a couple minutes. Give Kathy Harmon an audience.
Well, I would agree. And actually, we may have a possible tiny bit of information on Kathy's case. Now, I could be wrong on the year because I get some of the ones mixed up, but I believe it was 1976. She was out with a friend and actually made it home. And in fact, they know that because what she was wearing was actually found in her residence, but then disappeared. And she was related to someone who was a member of a motorcycle club at the time. And we actually have tracked somebody down that was very knowledgeable about the members of that club and are preparing to interview that person just to see what they know about Kathy. And so just a little, again, I feel my job is partly to have anybody that calls me about their relative or their friend and say, I care about this case. We care about this case. I may not know a ton, but here's what I know. And so we try to do that.
Right.
And don't get greedy, Avery. What do they say about somebody? Anyway, you won our everlasting respect. But I do think.
Oh, the everlasting gobstopper from Willy Wonka.
I actually had.
We'll send it to your home, first class, in the morning.
Yes. I actually had a. I had a stumper that now I feel bad. Should I ask it anyway, Jason? Because it's going to.
You might as well. You might as well.
Because
I've been stumped once. I might as well be stumped a couple times.
I am pretty sure that you can probably guess what the subject matter is, because what do I go on about all the time? Missing white woman syndrome.
Oh, missing white woman syndrome.
Okay.
Oh,
and here is my
scary topic. It's like almost like saying that the world is racist in my eyes. I don't necessarily embrace the concept of white woman syndrome.
Are you kidding me? Oh, you are kidding me.
No. I got stats to back this up. You ask your question.
Okay, I will.
And then I'll defend my position.
Okay. Name one person of color who went missing during the time period that Gabby Petito was missing.
Oh, you see, I don't have necessarily a name. I mean, I've talked about some of the cases on court TV and the like, but I'm drawing a blank right now.
Yeah. Okay. It's stumped. No, there are statistics on it. And by the way, we didn't coin that term. It's been around for 20 years. Gwen Eiffel, who used to be on PBS, coined it back in the late 90s. But this is going to segue back into, because you have been involved in a number of these cases and you've been retained and you've been asked to speak about them on court TV and all that kind of stuff. And so, I was going to ask, but we actually have a question. You lucked out. Did you type that question yourself, hoping that I would not be able to ask no, just kidding. Okay. Oh, two things. One, what do you think happened to Lloyd Reese and David Jaramillo? And since since the water has now been searched, what's your alternate theory now?
Right. That's a very good question because
Hmm.
for a while there we had reason to believe that the two of them went off the side of the road into East Canyon Reservoir. But we know Adventures with Purpose and Mike King uh, had gone through with their boats and sent sonar, and they found a vehicle, but not their vehicle. And it was a stolen vehicle from the 90s and not from the 70s when Lloyd and David went missing. So the question is, what happened to them? You know, there was speculation that they went to California. There was uh, rumors, that they're check the canyon, check the river, check the lake, but that didn't pan out. So unless their car is covered by overgrowth somewhere else down the mountain from East Canyon, then they're not in that vicinity. So what happened to the B210 that David Jaramillo owned and was driving? We're talking a different kind of culture now than existed back then. And with social media, everywhere is connected into local areas. So there can be a case in Nevada that everyone across the country starts to follow, or there can be a case in Utah or a case in Ohio. What we had back in the 70s is none of the sort. There was no social
It was
media.
the 80s. I think it was the 80s, but
Was it the 80s? I was thinking it was like
I
78.
sometimes the dates, I will admit that sometimes because I could be off, but I think you know what, to be honest, I'm bad with the dates, so I don't know.
No. So anyway, if this was today, like the Kylie Rodney case, everybody knows what car she was last in. They know where, what campground she was at. They know what counties are involved and things like that. So eventually the car could be discovered or she can be spotted in the public or anything like that. Back then, the news cycle would be at 6 and 10, and you wouldn't hear anything throughout the whole day. It might be a small story in the newspaper or something. If they, met some foul play and somebody ditched their car at the airport in Las Vegas or something, for example, we would never know because records back then, they probably just impounded the car and it wasn't shared across social media like we do now.
I agree with that. We're not giving up on that. For a long time, we really did believe it was probably 85. That's what I thought. Okay.
Okay, so
Anyway,
85.
we thought the answer was in the water. And so frankly, sometimes what we do is we work hard on something like that one guy that have stalked for 2 years that I'm convinced murdered his wife. If it turns out he did not murder his wife, then I will move on. I will pivot to something else. And so we are looking for something on that too. How many cold cases are there currently in Utah, and what top two would you consider the biggest priorities to solve? And of course, one has to be, we've already said, has to be Rosie Tapia because that's why we exist. But
Right.
what's the answer to that? Rough, and it's an estimate, of course.
Okay, so the number one case to our heart would be Rosie Tapia. Is there a second? Gosh, I didn't really give it much thought, to be honest, because like Kara, like you say, they all have reason to be researched. They all have reasons to be investigated, and we're not trying to favor one over the other.
Yeah.
We all find our pet projects. Well, I do because I'll start looking at a case, but instead of being able to look at it for a minute and put it to the side and pick up another one like you do, I start reading it and then I submerge myself into it. Now I got a new pet project. So that's probably a character flaw of mine, and not that I'm selecting, good low-hanging fruit or interesting cases that stand out more than somebody else. I just happen to grab one and then I do a deep dive and I know I'm stuck. Not as
Yeah,
good of a multitasker like you.
it is interesting how we do all have our I don't know, it's something that draws us to particular cases. And I've got one where the murder victim was just 2 blocks away. But yeah, well, we do treat them all the same. We're actually later this month, and don't say what it is because it's you'll know what it is. We're going to make an announcement about something we have been working on for 2 years now that is going to help nationwide resolve murders and deaths of, I'll just say, an underserved population. And we're the first ones to have this. I'm extremely excited. So check our website. You're going to get, oh, and by the way, the number of cold cases currently in Utah, I believe that the state database has about 400. We have probably a couple of dozen more than that we feel like should be on the database, but aren't. In fact, let me just go into this for a second. Jason, people may not realize that a number of cases get closed for reasons other than being solved, right? I mean, how many? Got a little bit of a glitch there on the internet for Jason. Let me see if he's coming back.
I'm back. Sorry.
Okay, you're back. I mean, give some of the reasons why cases get closed that have nothing to do with being solved.
Well, gosh, it depends who you talk to. There was a series of cases in the 80s, for instance, where we understand that a egocentric sergeant was trying to close cases prematurely to keep his record well. And so he would take unsolved homicides and reclassify them as unattended deaths. And there's a whole batch of them that since then, thanks to the wisdom and good integrity of the current administration, they've reopened them as unsolved and, restored them to the original classifications as unsolved homicides. And they're actively investigating them. And hopefully some of them will get solved despite the treatment that they received during the 80s.
And we did verify that. We were told that by a person who was in law enforcement that had happened. But, I always tell people I don't believe anything I hear from anybody. But we did confirm that through our own review of the reports, et cetera, that a number of cases had just been closed as unattended deaths, even when there were legitimate clues, I guess we'd say. We've had some where one of our favorites is the one where a little tiny 90-pound woman, her case was closed as undetermined. But the reason it was closed was they surmised that somehow, even though her apartment was like 600 yards away, her nice warm apartment, that she had lifted a 150-pound steel manhole cover and somehow crawled under it to get warm. That one is closed, but not on our list. We had other ones. We had one with an antifreeze. We had one with a gunshot wound to the head in a motel in Ogden. So our list is quite a bit longer than the state's list.
Right.
Okay, here is a question that will humiliate you. And it's Stump, Jason. Now you should know this one, but here's the difference, because you do deep dives and you do more recent cases because of your profession. I mean, people come to you as a private investigator. They don't usually come to a lawyer. Help me on my case, although the Tapias did. But okay, Jason, what serial killer is believed to have killed Nancy Wilcox?
Oh, that's very interesting, because that is a common misconception that they believe that Ted Bundy killed Nancy Wilcox, but that is really not the case. From the timeline that Carrie, you and I and some experts have talked about.
Sure, you're talking about Nancy Wilcox?
Yeah.
Oh, I know. I mean, I know that it was Bundy. I mean, that they think Bundy did it, but.
Oh, right, okay. But he wasn't in the area at the time.
That's an interesting thing. We've talked about this, and we only have a few more minutes, so everyone is thrilled about that. But we've talked about this, that for a while, especially in the 80s, and we've seen it in the reports, because I spend a lot of my spare time issuing public records requests for the reports, where we call it, well, I think there's different things that are called the Bundy syndrome, but when we say the Bundy syndrome, we mean that in the 80s, there was a tendency or an excitement to basically look for a serial killer explanation for everything. That's how Henry Lee Lucas was able to confess to 600 murders that were nearly all BS. And you know, you've seen that even in Salt Lake. The first thing was we currently have 16, we call them the 80s ladies just for organizational purposes, 16 unsolved murders of women 32 or younger in the Salt Lake Valley between 1983 and 1989. Do we think they were all killed by a serial killer? No. Do we think some of them were killed, you know, a handful of them were killed by the same person? Yes. But I think one thing that led to them being cold was just kind of jumping to, it must be a serial killer. And I think that actually impeded the investigation.
Right, because a handful of them, for instance, one investigator in particular wanted to blame a handful of these cases on a serial killer out of Idaho, Paul Ezra Rhodes, which it was proved he had no access, no time he spent here in Salt Lake. And on one of the particular crimes, his time card at work showed that he was actually at work that day. So it wasn't Paul Ezra Rhodes.
No, and it's kind of sad because they were all excited about it. But when you see the log, the activity log of the task force, you could tell they were just, now what do we do? Because it came back and said, our guys just came back from Idaho today. It's not him. And they literally didn't know what to do. And they had spent a year or two going down that angle. So we are nearing our time because we wanted to keep it relatively short, but I am going to ask, we do have a question about Kipling Davis. Who is that? And what do you know about the status of that that person?
Sure. Kipling Davis was a high school girl in Spanish Fork that went missing in 98. Was it 98? I think 95, 98, somewhere around there. I'm not so good on dates either, but she was pretty much last seen with a handful of guys at the school, and one of the individuals, Timmy Olson, ended up pleading to manslaughter concerning her disappearance. Her body's never been found, never been recovered. There's never been any admission where she's at, and still to this day, Timmy Olson claims innocence even though he did a plea. So go figure.
All we can hope is that somebody, we do periodically look for her. You know, tips for that are appreciated and looked at. One of the things you just mentioned a minute ago is something that we're going to talk about in a later, I don't know, episode or whatever. This.
We're going to do this again.
Well, I don't know, unless somebody gets a restraining order, and so. But speaking of which, though. One of the things I think I'd like to talk about isn't maybe necessarily to stump you, but I think people need to know that there are ways about locating information that they may not know about. To be honest, I did not know about that cool license plate tracker. I don't even know what it's called that you use. And let's not go into it now because I want to save it for next time. Okay. And then we had a recent case where we, with one day to spare, were able to get some special in-depth records from a phone company, and if people don't know about these things, they're going to get erased. And so,
right, so maybe the next one we can do specific to missing persons.
Okay, I'm up for that. So we had decided we would keep it to 55 minutes, which we're about there. We appreciate the people that were on here. We are going to keep, I think this keeps track of the questions, and we can, of course, by then he will have had a chance to cheat by looking it up. So let's just assume that he would have been stumped. Anyway, thanks to everybody that watched or that watches later on the video of this. Do you have anything else to say, Jason, other than you got stumped multiple times?
I did. I'm not as smart as I self-credit.
Okay. Well, I didn't. Now I don't know what to say. You weren't supposed to admit it.
I wasn't supposed to admit it. Well, I'm an investigator. I'm a really good investigator, and I accept facts.
Okay. You were able to conclude that you'd been stumped. That's good. Anyway, thanks to everyone for bearing with us on our debut here. And next time.
And for the people that try to stump me with specific cases, if you provide that information in advance, we can do some research and address that in future episodes. So it's not I don't know answer, but we could actually give you an answer if you wanted one. So share with that in advance, and we'd be happy to help out that way.
That is true. If we can get information on it, the first thing I will do is figure out whether or not we can get the records. Anyway, so yeah, we would love to talk about those things. So, all right, we're going to end this now. Thank you, DIY Mom. Appreciate it. Thanks, Marilyn. And actually, Marilyn's son is something we can talk about next episode also.
Because it's a missing person.
He is. And so we'll do that. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you down the road. Thanks. See you next week, maybe. Bye.
Night.